Are you truly stepping into the role of leader in your own life the way you know you're meant to? What shifts would unlock your full potential? It's time to explore those answers with the host of Sacred Leadership, intuitive business coach Sherisse Alexander.
Welcome to yet again another episode of Sacred Leadership with Sherisse here on the Inspired Choices Network. Today, I am joined by Philip Hunt, the Catalyst Coach. And today we're going to dig into something that you, the audience, may be familiar with. And if not, then this will be fresh and new for you. But the question I would pose is, what does it cost a man to stay armored? And what becomes possible when the moment he sets it down? In today's episode, myself and Philip will be tracing the passage from the wounded masculine to the divine masculine, the conditioning so many men inherit, the reckoning that finally cracks the armor open, and the grounded present strength waiting on the other side. Philip will share his own path through that turn, an honest look at what it takes for a man to stop performing his strength and start living it. A conversation today about healing, becoming, and the quiet power of a man who has done his own work for himself and for everyone in his orbit. Today we'll cover the conditioning behind the wounded masculine and its hidden costs, what actually cracks that armor open, and why it rarely is chosen. The disorienting middle, where the old self can no longer exist, and the not yet new self has actually evolved and taken full form. The divine masculine as embodied strength, which is protection without control, and why this work ripples outwards to partners, children, teams, and culture. So welcome back again, Philip, today. And thank you so much for diving into what I consider to be a critical part of the conversation when we talk about leadership.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here, and I'm looking
Thanks.
forward to this journey. This is a new angle, so we'll see how we explore here.
Yeah, I mean, I think I shared with you that this particular topic has been, I've been circling the drain for a little bit, and I was calling it the divine masculine. But the truth is before you can get to embodying the divine masculine, there is the work of the wounded masculine. And I think that, some people might pose the question, well, why? Why am I bringing it forward right now? And to be honest, when I reached out to you, I had been sitting down and I was watching something on TV, and there was a lot of trauma and drama on this particular show that I was watching. But when I took a step back objectively, what I could see outside of that was just how much pain was being depicted on this particular show, and on both sides, not just, it was a man and a woman that were airing their laundry on air, but it was just the immense amount of pain that I was witnessing on both sides of the equation. Here was this woman who was talking about all of these things that she needed, that she wanted, that she desired. She felt like she was being pretty clear and consistent. And on the other side was this complete wall. Like, it was so visible, this wall of like this mask and this this display of I'm completely unaffected. And so the reason why I think that it's such an important part of the conversation around leadership is that I think it's been my observation that I don't believe that it's that men don't want to be able to show up. It's that they haven't necessarily been given the tools to access that easily. So what are your thoughts around the importance of the wounded masculine to divine masculine journey?
It's extremely important. It's going to be transformational for all of humanity, and it's not easy. We can have the tools, but it's easy to the degree to which you're willing to die to yourself. And the whole woundedness puts up this guard and this self-defense and that wall that you spoke of. And so getting past that guard is the journey. And that's where you really find who you are. who you are in God, and then you're able to connect and resonate with other people better because there's not that wall anymore within yourself or between you and them. So it's extremely important in family, in business, in corporations, with employees, with superiors, with inferiors. We're in constant communion and connection with people. And the more we're blocked or divided from ourself, the more we're going to be blocked and divided from others. So this is a very important conversation.
Perfect. And the question that immediately comes to mind, because I mean, you and I work in this space, so the terminology is clear and makes sense. But for those who might not know even what is the divine or the wounded masculine? What does that look like? How would somebody be able to identify themselves in there? And for the audience that is listening, this is not judgment. This is not, I don't love labels, but it's just, I would say, a category of characteristics that you might be moving with that would say, oh, hey, I might be showing up like this. This might be a part of where I am at this point in time. But in your opinion, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we all embody both masculine and feminine energy, right? So the masculine is more the doer. If you look at a sexual relationship, the man sows the seed and the woman receives the seed. So the man's the doer, the woman's the receiver, the receptive. Um, so you have a lot of masculine energy in the corporate world because you got to do stuff, we got to get stuff done. And a lot of times we neglect or suppress the feminine part, which actually is where real powerful manifestation happens, but we neglect it to just get things done. But it comes at a cost. And it's important to have balance in every area of life. And when you don't have that balance of the masculine and feminine, then you're going to be neglecting something. You're going to be missing something, and you're going to be overcompensating in one way. So it shows up in neglecting and suppressing your emotions and just pushing people aside and, mission over people or profit over people. And it down the line, it can create some major, major problems with your employees, with divorces, with trauma, with all sorts of things. And it really comes from the woundedness of your identity. And a lot of people are trying to run into that masculine energy to try to make themselves feel better about themselves from a deep place of a deficit because of whatever, their parents not believing in them or a traumatic relationship or a boss firing them. There's so many ways and angles that this can manifest, but um, so the masculine is the doer, and if we overcompensate and get too much in the doer, we're going to neglect the other things that really matter and push things out of our way just to get that mission done. And it's not worth it. And a lot of people get to that point where they burn out or they lose their family or lose their job and realize my priorities were all messed up and this wasn't worth it. And it's because of things out of order in the soul.
Hmm. And so you've just described what it can, at a high level, manifest like in a corporate or institutional organization with somebody who might be in a position of authority and power over other people in the context of work. Um, what would that, in your observation or even in your experience, what would that look like for someone in a more personal space and place?
Yeah, so oftentimes we carry it home to our family, to our home life. And it's the masculine, it's a lot of doing and not a whole lot of like being and sitting with
Mm,
yourself. And so when you have all the pressures of the world and I have to make the money and do the thing, you're so in your head and you're so focused on getting the thing done and not really considering the repercussions or the implications of what is that costing you.
mm,
Everything comes with a cost. You're going to trade something for no matter what you do. And the question is the cost worth it? So you come home and you may, your wife asks you something that, triggers you because you're upset at work and you just blow over her emotions and run away or storm away or take it out on your children. There's so much emotional turmoil and overload that gets spilled out on family or on friends or whatever. And it doesn't seem at all logical to them, but there's a cause and effect within.
Hmm.
Does that answer your question, or should we go deeper?
You go as deep down the rabbit hole as you want to
Yeah.
go.
I think it really comes down to slowing down. Again, I'm a follower of Christ, and the scripture says, "Be still and know I am God." And the Bible talks a lot about entering the rest. And this world is so fast paced. The corporate world is so busy. People have so many things on their plates that we often get inundated with all these things. And then the true priorities, our emotions, the people we love, the people who are close to us kind of get pushed away because for the sake of the mission or um, because we don't have the capacity. And it really comes back to capacity. Every wound, every issue within our soul affects we talk about electrical flow on these podcasts. It affects our electrical conductivity, and we only have so much capacity to carry so much. Um, and we have families, we have lives, we have hobbies, we have work, we have all these things. And so when our soul is in that wounded masculine and we're go, 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 then it's gonna eventually catch up with us and we're not gonna neglect the things that matter. And I think we may do this a little bit later, but I think it's important to bring in that feminine part of it
Hmm.
because you can't have one without the other. You can't have light without darkness. And so it's important to discern and distinguish the difference and understand the balance there.
It's literally like you read my mind. Because where I wanted to go with this next. And it's not like, and for the audience, I need you to be really clear on this. This is just a dialogue between two people that I think represent, I consider myself to be a divine feminine. And I think that you would likely consider yourself to be a divine masculine, but it took work to get there. It took introspection and reflection. We are about to go to our first break, but before we do that, you had just said that we do need the balance within that. And so the question that immediately came to mind is, well, we're talking about being in the place and space of identifying with maybe some of the characteristics that a wounded masculine might show. But, and that's great to identify that. But there's also the piece which I guess I wanted to offer to women, because I hear a lot of women talking about the things that they want and the desires that they have and the men that they want to show up and all of this other kind of stuff. And that's fabulous. But it also begins way before that. Way, 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 way before that. And so if there is anybody watching today who is listening, it's you have a part to play in this as the female counterpart and the female when we are raising our sons. And I think that it's ultimately about giving them the tools when they are young to be able to identify with what those feelings are, right? My son and I were having this conversation the other day. He is a new baby. And yeah, that happened.
Congrats.
Thank you. But he is a son. And the conversation that came up was, well, how do you even describe feelings to him? How do you help him identify what sadness is, what anger is, what happiness is, what joy is, what envy is, what jealousy is, right? Like there's so many different subtleties to each of those energies. And how do you describe that to someone? A fully lived adult versus even a child who hasn't necessarily had any of these experiences yet? How do we begin to give our kids, our male children, the tools and the resources to navigate their way through that? Because I think, as much as we're here to talk about wounded masculine transitioning to divine masculine, it starts, like I said, way before that. So I'm going to let you speak on that in just a moment, Philip, when we come back from our first break.
Leadership isn't reserved for CEOs or world leaders. It's something each of us is called to embody in our own lives. But how do you awaken that inner leader with clarity and confidence? On Sacred Leadership with intuitive business coach Sherisse Alexander, you'll discover powerful tools and spiritual insights to align your words, actions, and outcomes. Tune in every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, and 8 Pacific, right here on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is Sacred Leadership with Sherisse Alexander. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also send an email to Sherisse at pavitraleadership.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back to Sacred Leadership with Sherisse here on the Inspired Choices Network, where today I am joined by Philip Hunt, the Catalyst Coach, and I realize I forgot to mention the title. From Wounded Masculine to Divine Masculine is the topic of today's show. And today, what Philip and I are discussing is exactly that. The title's pretty straightforward and covers it all, but the journey from the wounded masculine to divine masculine and the importance of understanding those energies and what that journey looks like, especially as it pertains to leadership, not just in the workspace, but in our personal lives and our spiritual lives. It's such an integral part to leadership, is my strong belief. And right before we had gone to break, I had posed a question to Philip because he had dropped the juicy nugget. I was like literally reading my mind, and he said, I hope at some point we begin to talk about the feminine counterpart here. And I said, yeah, that was actually my next question, which was, I believe it begins way before men get to adulthood. And then it begins, during childhood, and mothers giving children the tools to be able to identify what those feelings are, emotionally regulate, be able to emotionally articulate what's going on so that they can be so fully in touch with those often complex emotions. And especially as you mentioned, Philip, like the traditional role of the man has been to be the hunter and to go out there and provide for their family. But so that's a lot of pressure. And you being a man, I think you can speak to that a little bit more, that journey from childhood to getting there, if you're so lucky.
Yeah, so I was adopted from birth, and that came with a whole world of identity issues that I struggled with my whole life. Um, and I was a very emotionally turbulent child and got into a lot of trouble and everything. And I didn't have anybody who understood or who navigated me through those emotions. And um, even if somebody tried, I probably was too wounded to even receive it. But now, so I've gone through a lot of work, a lot of prayer, meditation, fasting, therapy, healing to get to the place where I am. And I've seen literally miraculous results from the the liberation of that energy from when you heal yourself from within. it allows for that energy to flow through you and you can direct that to certain things. But my 5-year-old son is emotionally brilliant. Like we walk
Mm,
him through things I wish I were walked through, way
mm,
back when. He gets angry, and so I'll slow him down and we'll breathe. And I say, all right, what are you feeling right now? And we just tune in, and he's developing the vocabulary and he's able to articulate his feelings. And not only that, but it's increased his empathy to understand like when his sisters are feeling a certain way, or he's very intuitive and very empathetic, which makes him a just a, we went and visited my wife's aunt and uncle the other day, and he was like freaked out at my son's vocabulary and how he articulates so well because he's so in tune with himself. And he is
mm,
intelligent, but it's more than like IQ, it's EQ. It's the
yeah.
emotional quotient. And when you're able to navigate that within yourself, then it really creates a real pathway and framework to connect with other people and to communicate even without language, to understand where people are coming from. And when you get to certain levels of spirituality and energetics, like you can direct the situation through your thoughts and through emotions because we're all spiritual beings. Um, and so giving children that understanding, that identity, the tools to really walk through and navigate their own emotions is setting them up for success because this is a traumatic world. We're gonna, encounter issues and problems and fights and disagreements. And it's such a valuable tool that I wasn't given, and I had to
Mm.
learn later in life, and it would be great for us to set up our children.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I was reflecting a little bit during the break on my own experience with my sons as a mother. And it feels like it was almost intuitive because nobody said to me, hey, you should give your sons the tools to make feelings okay. And so, when they were young, and they're starting to do those temper tantrum kind of things, I can remember frequently just giving them full license to feel whatever they're feeling, and not attaching a stigma to it that it was bad, that they needed to repress that they were completely entitled to feel those feelings. And when they were ready, then we could begin to like work through the language and the verbiage of like what was really going on with them. And as I often say on this particular podcast, or I have over the years, which is that, when I look at the young men that my sons have evolved into, and it wasn't even just as children, right? It would be all those various steps and stages that kids are going to go through where they would be, as you just identified, so able to articulate clearly, you hurt my feelings. This is how I'm feeling, and I don't like it. Like just in very simple language. That as I watched them going through those often tumultuous teenage years, and they were coming up with or facing things that, would trouble a teenager, the evolution within that is I would say to them, oh, wow, it seems like you handled that beautifully. What you're experiencing now is not that far off from adulthood. And sometimes I think that as being adults, we really can minimize what kids go through or teenagers go through. If anything, what I did was validate them so that they would know that you're really doing a good job of using these tools to navigate this. Like, not to say that you're not going to have any future issues, but keep doing what you're doing because it's serving you well. And so I just bring that up. Philip, you're talking about it in an even more expanded way, right? Back when my kids would have been 5, I wasn't doing breath work. I wasn't doing meditation. I wasn't doing any of those things. It just seemed to me at that point in time, just give them the space, give them the container that they can feel safe enough in to have those emotions, give them permission. Because I think what we see is that if we suppress that, and in previous generations, I think societally, the message has been don't show feelings. And if you are allowed to have a feeling, it's only anger or zero emotion. And so the question I would pose is, are we surprised that we see the wounded masculine today? How are we surprised?
Yeah, it just compounds. That's the nature of it. And what you said was very, very important about so we see anger, right? That's what comes up first and foremost, because that's the defense mechanism. We get
Hmm.
angry and we feel like we have to defend. And if you're able to get past that anger, you go through a whole gamut of emotions. And really, it's the grieving process, because anytime you're wounded, you lose a portion of yourself, and you have to grieve the part of that loss. And that's okay. That's normal. But there's a sadness, there's a grieving, there's all this stuff that is uncomfortable. People don't like, and people don't want to go there. So they just suppress it or they neglect it and then move on and move on. But eventually it's going to catch up with you. And that's when things blow up. That's when burnout happens. That's when the divorce happens. That's when it didn't happen overnight. It's
Hmm.
it's the long, 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 long buildup of suppression and neglect and all that. And another really important point is that you are safe, so you could give your children that safe space. You are
Hmm.
comfortable enough within yourself that the reality is we're projecting all the time. That's just who we are. We're going to project our reality onto others. You had that safety and understanding within you, so you gave that to your children. A lot of people, when their children start getting emotional, they can't handle it because it starts resonating something within them
Hmm.
that's unprocessed. And it makes them come face to face with that, even though it may be subconscious, and they start freaking out internally. And so they can't navigate themselves, so they definitely can't navigate their children through it. And so they push it aside and say, stop crying or spank them or whatever, just to shut it up. And that, as we have seen in society, has not led to a good place. So there's a place for discipline, and there's a place for navigation. There's a place for communication, and the more we are in tune with ourselves and comfortable with ourselves and safe and healed within ourselves, the better we'll be able to interface with anybody else.
Beautifully put. What occurs to me, we've talked a little bit about, those formative years and what we as parents and, future parents can do. Um, but let's move now through to the transition piece. So, or we can at least begin to have a conversation around this. Um, that transition from anybody who might be identifying with, okay, that maybe sounds like me, that's resonating. What's next? What happens? Now, what do I do? Great, I'm a wounded masculine. Now, what do I do?
Buckle up, because it's a journey. If you want to change, if you want to make a change, it is really a journey of transformation, and it's a commitment. And ideally, you get somebody who is skilled and who can walk you through that, who's been through it themselves, whether that's a therapist or a mentor, or a pastor, or a brother, or whatever. Um, because it's a messy journey. It really is. It's the journey internally. So practically, to answer your question, what next? You start sitting with yourself. You slow down and say, okay, there's these wounds, and you start paying attention to those wounds, because children are the same way. They're going to start undue attention. They're going to start fighting or yelling or whatever because they need to be paid attention to, and your wounds need your attention. So you get in prayer, you commit it to God, you go into meditation, you get a friend who you feel safe with, and you process this stuff, get a therapist, whatever it takes. You go through the journey of walking through each wound, and there's a lot of them. If it were just one thing, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It's gotten to the point where your capacity is so depleted that you got to go through a lot of stuff. And a lot of people don't make change until they're on that precipice of destruction. So please don't let it get to that point. Start way before, heed the signs. If you're listening to this right now, there's a reason. Um, but it takes that journey, slowing down and really diving deep and confronting the uncomfortable.
Thank you for that. We are going to go to our next break, but when we come back, we are actually going to continue on the messy middle and maybe dive
Yes.
in a little bit deeper to what that looks like. Because as you have indicated, um, it's, I never want to make it seem super simple. And as I often say to people, you have to think about wounds, not only the emotional wounds, but the like a physical wound. When you get wounded on the physical body, there's layers of healing that have to go on.
Yeah.
So hence the reason it can be a long and arduous process. And I want to talk a little bit more about that when we come back. We will be right back.
Leadership isn't reserved for CEOs or world leaders. It's something each of us is called to embody in our own lives. But how do you awaken that inner leader with clarity and confidence? On Sacred Leadership with intuitive business coach Sherisse Alexander, you'll discover powerful tools and spiritual insights to align your words, actions, and outcomes. Tune in every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, and 8 Pacific, right here on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is Sacred Leadership with Sherisse Alexander. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also send an email to Sherisse@pavitraleadership.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back to Sacred Leadership with Sherisse here on the Inspired Choices Network, where today I am joined by Philip Hunt, the Catalyst Coach, and we are talking about from wounded masculine to divine masculine. And right before the break, the question I posed to Philip was, okay, great. You are beginning to identify yourself as perhaps a wounded masculine. And I said, okay, now what? And Philip talked about the messy middle. Back over to you, Philip, to maybe break that down a little bit more. Because, you made a very valid point around ideally having someone that you can walk with. But I think the other thing that I've observed, and for the audience, just let's be clear, I am obviously not male, or I'm not male. Let me make that clear. A lot of the observations that have encouraged me to bring this particular topic today is just exactly that. Observations of what I see in the real physical waking world. Of course, what you see on TV and media. And then in addition to that, just the various places that I've been paying attention to or listening to in terms of men actually quite simply saying, I don't feel safe. So the suggestion of hopefully find someone to walk with you on this journey. What if they just don't feel safe enough yet? Then what?
Yeah, it can be a lonely road. For me, I did it with God. He walked me through it. It was and I'm still going through it. Think I'm through the bulk of it. Um, but it was a very messy, intimate journey, and I didn't have anybody who understood what I was going through with the adoption, and then with we've talked in the other podcasts about like what God did and called me away from my whole life and business and everything. It was a very, very unique journey, and almost nobody could understand what I was going through. So I needed, God to walk me through that. And it you might be alone in it, and it's not fun, but that's also part of the journey. Is that this is a journey of learning yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming to know who you are, not who your parents said you were, not who society says you were, not your failures, not even your successes, but like beyond all that, who are you? And what's holding you back from that true you? And that's peeling back the layers. That's getting deep into these wounds. And it's really like it's poking the wounds. It's looking at it and saying, all right, why do I feel this way?
Mm-hmm.
And what was the origin, what was the root of this? And there's a lot of different therapy modalities and stuff you could implement, but really it comes down to asking questions and bringing light to that situation. And everybody needs a different approach to healing. Like I've gone through a lot of different things. Some stuck, some didn't at all. Some were like miraculously, just amazing breakthrough, and some took months or years. So it's a messy middle.
Mm-hmm. I don't love that phrase, but it feels very appropriate because that's what it feels like, and that's the truth. And for those that are tuned in today, I think it would be, we'll say, almost irresponsible to indicate that it's going to be anything other than uncomfortable. And it will be very uncomfortable because the way that I liken it to people, the journey to self discovery really is one that you learn something in theory, then life happens and you get to apply.
Yeah,
And either it had beautiful results or it didn't, or you missed something. Or so think of it like school. You go to school, the teacher gives you a lesson, you get homework where you're applying, and then the test comes.
yeah, yeah,
And don't be discouraged if it doesn't go swimmingly the first time that you try, because it can be very. There will be magical moments where you're like, yes, I got it, nailed it. But there will, I don't want to say equally, but I think that the regressive piece can be because when something comes and it's big and it shakes you, it could feel almost like, why isn't this working? Like I don't get it. Why is this not working? Wasn't I supposed to master this? Well, it
yeah, right.
could take a lifetime to master it if we're being
Yeah.
really, really honest.
Yeah, and like you said, the school, there's a reason you go to school from a young age. And this type of
Yeah,
stuff should be taught from a young age so
it
that you're not
absolutely
having to
should
learn
be.
it in your 30s, 40s, whatever. Um, Something that's really important to understand, like you mentioned, like this could be for the rest of your life, is that the deeper the wound is embodied in your nervous system, the more integrated it is, the more difficult it is to unravel it, so to speak. And there are some remarkable technologies and modalities that can expedite that process. But so to get just vulnerable and put it out there, I've had a lot of rage issues, a lot of, I had substance abuse and stuff. That almost overnight just gone. Rage took a little bit longer, a few months or so. But with my adoption and everything and my identity issues, I had a lot of sexual promiscuity. And the Bible says sexual sin is sin against the body. And that
Hmm.
sexual trauma really dives deep into the nervous system, into the emotions, and it gets really, really integrated. And that took me years and years and years of fasting and prayer and therapy and stuff to deal with because it was so deeply embedded. And that comes with a host of manifestations. And you mentioned like the magical moments. When you get through this stuff, it does become magical. Like the messy middle sucks, but there is a promised land on the other side. And I mean, we've shared some testimonies in the other podcasts. Like I have so many stories of just remarkable experiences because of the healing and the reconciliation and the liberated energy that you're able then to direct and use for life. But it's a process and a journey to get there.
Hmm. It absolutely is. So with that in mind, I think you've given some great tools and options. And I think maybe to summarize the piece, like you said, you had God. And the word that came to mind immediately was an anchor, and something that ultimately, and I would be very, very careful here. If we talk about God, the divine, whatever the God of your believing is, um, ultimately, I think we can all agree that it's something that lives within each and every one of us. And I think the reason why I'm talking about this anchor for a moment is it's important not to anchor to something that is outside of yourself. The whole point, as you mentioned, is to begin to build that love of self, that reliance of self, that confidence in self, because it is ultimately when you are anchored in that spark of you that is divine, which dwells within self, then we can really begin to show up as the divine masculine, because then you're not worried with outside noise. You're anchored in self. You're not worried about the people that come and go because you are anchored in self. Did you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I would completely agree. And as the Bible says, the kingdom of God is within. So, like you're saying, the external is just a reflection of what's flowing internally. From the heart flow the issues of life. And we put out this electromagnetic field. All those wounds, all those emotions, all those subconscious beliefs are leaking out into the ether and they're creating our reality. And so this whole process is learning to really gain mastery of your soul, of your emotions, of learning who you are, of becoming regulated, gain self-control, understand your emotions and your thought processes so that you can be intentional with who you are. Jesus was a master. Like there are masters that when you know who you are and when your internal resonance is so strong, the world starts shifting into your reality. And you're
Mm-hmm.
creating your reality all the time. You're creating the trauma. You're creating those difficult situations at work. You're creating the problems with your wife and with your children and with your husband. You are creating that because that's flowing from within. And that's a really powerful point because you're creating that, it gives you the possibility to take extreme ownership, take responsibility, and then you can shift that as well. But it starts with saying, hey, I'm responsible for me. This is my soul. This is myself, and I'm ready to take responsibility and make a change here.
I'm so glad you segued into that. It's literally like you're 100% tuned into what I was about to say. Because I was about to say the difficult piece I feel often for, I don't even want to genderize it, but it's that accountability and acceptance of ownership. And that's a bold statement that most people do not want to even begin to take
Right.
ownership of, is I am in co-creation of my experience fully. It means that, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say men don't love that word victim. They do not love it. And I'm sorry if that stings, but it means then, like, well, no, I'm not acting as a victim. But if you're not willing to say and take ownership of, I am co creating this. And I think the most important thing here to understand is that's fully subconscious. It's not anybody's fault. It's not a shame, a blame, a judgment. There's
Right.
zero of that in there. But once you can begin to say, hey, maybe I am vibrating something out there that is giving me this experience that I do not like. So, what do I have to shift? And I think that for people, men, the initial response is, what do I need to do? But that's not the response. That's where the actual divine masculine comes in. That's where the balance with the divine feminine is, which is, no, it's how do I need to be? That's what you're talking about. Not do, be, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nailed it. And I'm not even masculine.
You are though, and I am, and I'm
Yeah, I know.
feminine, and
Yeah,
that's yeah.
yeah.
We need to embrace the fullness of who we are.
Absolutely.
And
So
as you
we,
do,
yeah. Yeah, sorry,
You'll
go
enter
ahead.
into balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are going to take our next break, and when we come back, we spent a lot of today talking about the wounded masculine and um, when we are children and that journey through and what to look for. So let's, when we get back, turn to what does the divine masculine actually look like? How do you know when you're actually starting to show up as that? Next up after this break.
Leadership isn't reserved for CEOs or world leaders. It's something each of us is called to embody in our own lives. But how do you awaken that inner leader with clarity and confidence? On Sacred Leadership with intuitive business coach Sherisse Alexander, you'll discover powerful tools and spiritual insights to align your words, actions, and outcomes. Tune in every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, and 8 Pacific, right here on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is Sacred Leadership with Sherisse Alexander. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also send an email to Sherisse at pavitraleadership.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back to Sacred Leadership with Sherisse here on the Inspired Choices Network, where I am joined by my friend,
Yeah. Hey,
Philip
friend.
Hunt, the Catalyst Coach. And we are covering the topic of from wounded masculine to divine masculine. I gotta say, I've really enjoyed this topic today. I didn't realize I was actually so passionate about it, but I've really, really enjoyed having this conversation with you today. So allow me to start with gratitude. Um, so right before the break, I had said, now let's move to great. You've identified yourself. You have some resonance with what you and I have talked about with here today. You've started doing the work either solo or in partnership with a professional or a spiritual team, etc. What does it now begin to look like when you are starting to embody what that divine masculine looks like?
Yeah, that's finally the fun part after you get through the
Mm-hmm.
messy middle. And what I was saying right before the break is as you learn the to embrace the feminine, which you need to get to the feminine part to truly get to divine masculine, because we embrace both. And as you get through that space, you show up more balanced and you're able to really better navigate and mediate any situation because it's no longer about you and your defensiveness. It's you're able to connect on a deeper level with other people and you see them for who they are. It's less of a my agenda and I need to get what I need to get done. And like it, so in corporations or in business, it's kind of like the pushy salesperson
Mm-hmm.
versus the salesperson who's there to serve and who's there to educate and to lead you and guide you into what you truly need based on who you truly are. And a good salesperson with ethics will know when to say, hey, this isn't for you, thanks for your time, versus just plowing over and trying to force the sale at any cost. And so it's it's becoming more selfless. It's becoming more understanding of where people are because you're more understanding of who you are. And it brings a lot more peace and just harmony to your life and relationships.
The phrase that's turning over in my mind is you almost become a servant leadership, like a servant leader. So in
So
service to the collective ultimately.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's a whole, it's literally going from, again, the Bible says the greatest shall be the least. It's going from the top of the organization to the bottom, and you
Mm-hmm.
still hold the authority. You still have power. You still have decision making, all of that, but you carry it with a presence of humility, of grace, of understanding, and you're not forcing an outcome. You're not forcing your team to do something. You're settling into the trust that because you're in your right place, everything else is going to flow into its right place. And
Hmm.
it brings a whole lot more peace and faith into your whole walk in life.
Yeah. So why do you think, I mean, if we talk about this in the practical sense, right? And I mean, that's ultimately the whole point of
Sure.
what this podcast is really meant to serve, is to have the conversations, the dialogues, the tools, the resources to see very clearly how we can integrate the very practical, physical, real world tools, resources, challenges, and obstacles with a spiritual presence. And so why does this matter? Like, why are you and I even talking about this? Why, what are we saying is ultimately going to transform? And not just in, my unique experience as an individual, but why does it matter to the collective?
You start.
I think it just touches like so many different avenues. Like it's the individual, and what prompted this is, like I said, sitting on my couch watching a show and just witnessing so much hurt on two sides of the equation. And it was almost like this visual of like beginning to put the bridges in place so that men and women alike. So yes, it started with relational, but how do men and women get on the same page? Because I think at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. When you strip away everything, men and women, humans, people, doesn't matter race, color, gender, creed, none of it matters. We all want to be loved, accepted, and just seen, full stop,
Yeah.
understood. So, how do we begin to build the bridge? And the only way that I can think of is helping both parties to understand it's not anybody's fault. So, let's just take fault away. It's just an unawareness. And so,
Yeah.
when we begin to become aware, now you have a choice, right? And as I say to some people, when I am coaching and I'm saying, then, and the question that inevitably always comes is, well, why do I have to do it? And I say, because you're aware and the other person might not be aware yet. So that is why I think it's important. Yes, it will begin to transform individual relationships, but I think there's something you said here today about the ripple effect. It is energy at the end of the day, so it has an effect on everybody in your circle, your sphere. So when we look at the world that we live in today, again, without judgment, if you don't like it, then change yourself.
Yeah. Be the change you want to see. It all starts
Yes,
with you.
it does.
Good. And you're absolutely right. We need both parties because, like, how do you make a baby? You need masculine, you need feminine. That's the power of creation. That's the power of manifestation. And it's the same thing. The only way to really truly change the world is we need both parts.
Hmm.
And if we've gone, I mean, the business world has been largely a man's world, and we see where that's gotten us. And so we need both parts in family. We need it in business. We need it in the world, because that's how we were designed. And when we honor our divine design, then we get divine results.
So beautifully said.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I really appreciate you diving into this conversation with me today and sharing a little bit more about yourself and your journey to becoming. I'm labeling you this way, so I hope that you're owning the
Okay.
label of being the divine masculine.
You're very welcome, and thank you. Um,
Excellent.
yeah. Why are you so passionate about this?
I think that realistically speaking, it's listening to the women around me, right? It's to me, it's everywhere. It's in my circle, it's on TV, it's in the media, it's on Instagram, it's on TikTok, just this massive discontent. And I know in those conversations that I have with women, I'm generally playing the advocate and saying like, it's he needs a space. So how can you be that space? How do we begin to take those walls down? So I would guess I would say for the feminine. Thank you for joining me today, Philip.
Thank you for listening to the Sacred Leadership Show. Sherisse returns Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, and 8 Pacific on the InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Until then, continue taking small steps today to be a leader in your life for the collective.